Hello and welcome to the very first episode of STX Next BrAInstorm podcast. We are very sorry about the delay, but hopefully we are live now and you can hear us and see us properly. My name is Paulina Dobija. I'll be your host for today's episode, and we will talk about what happens when artificial intelligence and user experience meet. It's my absolute pleasure to be joined today by Collman from Nile and Jakub Wujek, who are both equally passionate about artificial intelligence as they are about great design. So, Neil, thank you so much for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background?
Sure, yeah. So I'm design director at a company called Nile. So we're a consultancy based in the UK, and my background is very much in user experience design, service design, strategy. Really about understanding the human aspect of things. In the last couple of years, been collaborating quite significantly with the University of Edinburgh around natural language processing and AI, and also evolving our practice, how we deliver the work we do with our clients using this technology.
Thank you so much. Great to have you here. And Jakub, welcome. Your role at STX Next says AI product designer. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, it's a little big mixed role because my main responsibility is to help our clients to create meaningful digital products. But on the other hand, I'm responsible for teaching and creating learning materials for our product design team to explain them how to create meaningful and good AI products. Because I believe this is really important to create something what does matters. And after work, I'm also lecturer at the University of Technology, so I'm trying to convince students that UX is really important.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's going to be a very interesting conversation. So let me start by asking you something, Neil. What I've noticed that STX Next and Nile have in common is the emphasis on the importance of well-informed data-driven decisions in business. And there is something that I read on the Nile's website that said, let me quote, implementing the latest shiny tech without considering how it impacts your employees and your customers is a recipe for disaster. And I feel like maybe that's what happened with many companies just trying to implement AI without thinking, just to jump on that trends bandwagon. So could you tell me, how do you distinguish situations when implementing AI is actually worthwhile and the situations when it doesn't really make sense?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I sort of like to think about this as sort of good old-fashioned design, and what I mean by that is design, in its broadest sense, is good at connecting together different things. So understanding customer needs, understanding what a business is trying to do, and understanding the possibilities of technology. In other words, trying to solve the right problem. And I think, in the interests of demonstrating progress and the fact that you're doing something with AI, you can forget about one of those pillars and ending up focusing too much on the technology, and that has its consequences. So, I'll give you a quick example. One of the platforms we were involved with recently, we were implementing an AI solution that was trying to streamline a particular process, and when users were using this thing, even though it was way more efficient for this technology to be doing this reviewing job that it was doing, when users used it, they had to sit and wait for it to perform the task it was doing. So to them, when they were using it, it felt slow and inefficient, even though it was way more efficient than it used to be. So that's a bit of a dilemma, and so you don't necessarily expect that to happen because if you come at it from a logical standpoint, you think, well, it's more efficient, so surely that's better. But the reason design is important is because you have to understand all of these unintended consequences of the choices you're making about where to implement this technology, and that's one example. So good old-fashioned design, understand the intersection of these different things, look at the bigger picture, is really important for, I believe, for success with it.
I really like the acronym for that, good old-fashioned design. It's perfect.
Yeah, totally. I think it's fundamental to do not forget about this old-fashioned design because we've got all those principles, how to understand the problem and how to create great solution, but it's really easy to forget about this. And focus on a hype, because wow, right now we are creating some fancy new innovative technology. Do you want that really fancy technology? So this is the mindset we can see a lot of on the market right now, and this is really important to remember that firstly we've got to understand the process and the problem, and then think about the solution. Sometimes it will be AI, but sometimes not. And I believe for our clients, the most important thing is to solve their problem. And usually they do not care that much about the technology which is behind that, because the problem is the most important thing to them.
Yeah, so no implementing AI just for the sake of it. Let's remember that.
Exactly.
And Kuba, are there any other components of a successful AI projects that you see as crucial? So what are the things that make or break AI-based solutions?
I would say the heart of AI, which is data, basically, because those data will determine if it will work good or not. If you have really weak data at the beginning, the tool will also be weak.
Perfect, thank you. And speaking of data, Neil, I know that you recently conducted some research at Nile about the human side of AI and some most common adoption barriers. So could you talk us through some of these barriers and maybe how AI can serve as a remedy to them?
Yeah, so earlier this year we surveyed an audience and also spoke to people in person or remote interview, let's say, to try and understand what these perceptions are around this technology. And I suppose there's a few interesting takeaways. So one of them was that something like 70% of the audience that we engaged with above the age of sort of 28 hadn't used generative AI tools at all. So things like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Midjourney or any of these things, they hadn't used them. And so right there, that's obviously going to be a barrier, because if you've never used that type of technology, you don't really know what to expect from it. The way you interact with it is quite different. It's iterative, it builds on what's gone before. That's very different to the way people are used to using things. So right there, you've got a challenge. And historically, we've always relied on people, learning as they go. So if you're thinking about things like online banking, for example, 20 odd years ago, it was very early stages. It's only because there was a lot of money spent on communication and marketing and security technology and all these other things start to build up over time to the point where people, something like nearly 80% of people, certainly in the US, are banking on a website or on an app. And so it didn't happen overnight. So one of the big things to realize is that although the adoption curve might be steeper, people are still going to have those first experiences with this technology to understand what it's good at, how comfortable they are with it. And if you are if your product or service is one of those early stage interactions, then you've probably got more work to do because they haven't seen it before. So you have to spend time to understand what the needs are around that kind of initial experience. It's worth saying as well, we saw quite a big difference in kind of depending on how old you are would determine how comfortable you are with AI, and that's generally quite a common pattern. But can also depend on how how often you usually are an early adopter as well. So sometimes you'll have older cohorts that are early adopters of technology, and that does tend to change things a little bit as well. So it's an emerging pattern. We're still in the early stages. The fundamental core, though, is understanding your audience. And so in terms of overcoming those barriers, that's where I would begin.
Thank you. And from your point of view, Kuba, so how does UX serve as a remedy to some of these adoption barriers?
I will have, I think, simple answer, because I think that interfaces, but right interfaces are the proper answer. Because you can imagine that we live in a bubble, because people who are interested about AI live in the bubble, and we believe it's really easy to believe that everyone knows Claude, Perplexity, and really cool tools that will improve our work. But it's not true, basically, because I can give you an example from construction industry, where people mainly work on email and they don't know about this AI solutions. So probably using an AI to implement it via email will be better, because they can send, for example, quickly an email and they will have an answer with corrected English or something. And I think I know that it may sound stupid, but it's not. Okay, so we've got to remember that and think about this adoption, because we've got to implement AI in the solutions that our industry or users know right now, because learning curve is really difficult to skip.
Thank you. And Neil, do you agree that thus leaning on familiar structures is the way to go?
I suppose I can build on that a little bit. We definitely heard in our research that people's perception of AI is kind of colored by the experiences that they currently have. So a lot of those experiences are things like using Alexa or chatbots online and that kind of thing. And most of the time, those experiences aren't very good. And so at the moment, people's perception of this type of technology is, well, I'm not sure I'm going to get what I need from it. So I suppose, building on what Kuba was talking about, it's dangerous to assume that just because it's more effective and efficient on paper, that it's going to deliver the right outcome for your customers. Maybe because they don't believe that it's going to do the job for them, and they would still call you up, or they'll still use a traditional channel to get the job done. So, that's an important thing to remember. It doesn't mean you can't implement AI. It just means that the way that you do it, how you introduce it, and the first set of customers or users that might take it on board, they might be a small subset of your entire audience. So you just need to bear that in mind. I think we're still in very early stages. People haven't really seen what this is going to do in terms of the way they interact with apps and with websites, and when those things evolve, how that's going to change. So yeah, you have to be quite humble, I think, if you're going to introduce it.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to stay with you for a little bit, Neil, because I have a very big question. We talked a lot about that human-centric approach, focusing on human needs, and naturally, I would like to talk a little bit about inclusion. And you can see that topic throughout Nile's website. And I would like to understand, how do you understand inclusion in terms of AI, and how do you ensure that it's embedded in all your work?
Yeah. So a lot of the work we do in this area is, we call it designing for difference. And what that means is that you have to realize that the way someone interacts with your product or service, and how successful you are at helping them with whatever it is you're doing, depends on what they bring into that situation. And that can depend on many, many factors that you really need to understand. So if I come from a certain ethnicity, or perhaps the beliefs I have around money, for example, change the way I behave and interact with whatever it is you're providing me with. In our case, we do a lot of financial services. So that can be, bank accounts, savings accounts, credit cards, that kind of thing. Those factors are going to change the way I interact with you. And you need, so our practice is really based on that idea of designing for difference. So that foundation is still very relevant, of course, for AI. The challenge with AI is that difference isn't necessarily reflected in the data. So we talked about data earlier. If you're going to use data to drive predictive services, so you're going to, I don't know, help people manage their spending better. If you don't have the data that supports a particular cohort of your customer base to do that, then you're going to have big gaps in what you're trying to do. And as I say, we're still in very early stages of this, but I do think that is going to be one of the biggest challenges. And that's where, understanding, interacting with real customers and understanding their perspectives and making sure that your AI strategy takes that into account is going to be really important. You'll need diverse input to do that. It can't just be the technology team or the design team. We'll need to kind of expand our stakeholders, let's say. So yeah, certainly a big challenge, but something that we're exploring quite a bit at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And designing for difference. I love this. And Kuba, I'm very curious to hear, how do you ensure inclusion in your UX work, and how do you use AI to support you in this? I think you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, AI won't solve that problem for me. Yeah, I've got to do it manually. So I want to share three perspectives with you. First of all, is something that Neil mentioned before, data, because this is really important to choose right data when you want to train your AI, your model, or create new one. Because, for example, when you will use data from the environment that is not your user's environment, it will cause a lot of problems, because data will teach AI how other environment works. So you've got to remember that your data are really important. Second perspective, we've got to use tools we've got as a UX designers, because we've got a lot of help from existing tools like WCAG, it's called Wujek in Poland. I'm not sure the proper English name, but basically it's web accessibility guidelines. So we've got there a lot of rules that will help us as designers to decide which way is the best way to create something accessible for our users. And the third perspective is about AI tools, because we've got a lot of new opportunities right now. For example, probably a lot of people saw right now that we've got new models from multi-agent models from, for example, OpenAI, that can see our reality. And just imagine when, for example, when someone can see the world around him because we've got sight problems, the AI can solve that problem partially and can describe the world around that person. So I think it's marvelous. The new technology will help a lot with those problems, I believe.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We kind of smoothly covered the basics of any successful project, really. So focusing on the problems, focusing on the needs, then putting the human at the center. But when you're in technology, you need to think about the future all the time, right? So I'm going to just move to that now. Initially, the whole world was seeing AI kind of through rose-tinted glasses, as you know, as a great assistant to create funny pictures and create crazy poems, etc. And now there are more and more discussions about the dangers of that technology. So, because Halloween is just a day away, I was thinking maybe we can talk about some scary scenarios where AI will take us in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Neil, let me start with you.
Sure. I mean, it's such a huge topic, and there are like, hundreds and hundreds of scenarios. There's a few things I've been thinking about. One of them is, well, first of all, I'd say like the next 5, 10 years and whatnot, it's going to be turbulent and uncertain. And I think as human beings, we're not particularly great at dealing with that. So I think that in itself, that is going to be the reality. So it's not even that far-fetched. We are going to have to live through a period where the way that work gets done, how society operates, all of these different things. And then you obviously have, geopolitics and all these other scary things going on in the world. So being ready for that sort of turbulence, I suppose. But the thing about AI is we're moving into a place where, first of all, it's a technology that can do things. It can take action, right? So it's not just about providing information, which is where we've been in the past. You can use a website, you can search for things. It's information consumption. We're moving into a place where AI can do stuff. As soon as you can connect that technology with the physical world, so it can control things like cars, buildings, even your body. It's connected to your body. Then, of course, you can start to imagine, well, what happens when bad actors get involved or things go wrong, accidents and kind of, there's all sorts of things. So I think I've just started to sort of stray into that area, but as soon as we start to connect it with the real world, it gets a bit scary. I think the other thing I would say is that relationships with AI are going to become more sophisticated, more real, and our brains aren't very good at distinguishing emotions from an AI interaction and a real interaction. So that can obviously have really negative consequences, manipulating people's behaviors in bad ways, damaging communities, that kind of thing. And there's many sort of examples of that out there at the moment. So as a parent, those are the things I sort of worry about, is how can I equip my kids to, understand the difference between a genuine kind of real interaction and something that's not real, and how to navigate that. That's going to be a really difficult challenge, I think.
Thank you. And Kuba, any spooky stories that you could share with us?
Okay, I will start with an example, because I believe you can imagine yourself that you're holding a hammer. On the one hand, you've got really useful tool, but on the other hand, it can be dangerous. So the same stories with AI. And people were scared, for example, when we had industrial revolution, because they were scared about their future, their job. And right now I see a lot of similarities, but in different areas. So in the next 5, 10, 15 years, I believe that AI will solve a lot of problems. Maybe with building houses. That is really important problem right now. But on the other hand, maybe it will take a job of a lot of people that are really creative. So I think we can guess, only we can guess right now what will happen in the future. But the main issue and thing that we should think about is the dynamic reaction of our government, of the people. So they've got to be flexible. And I can quote a meme, so we've got to adapt and overcome quickly, because right now we've got a lot of impressive technology. In the upcoming year, we will have totally new tools, and we've got to think how we can solve our current problems. For example, right now we can generate really realistic videos. So you can just imagine how scary it can be.
So it's definitely a double-edged sword. Let's just hope that we stay in charge of it and not the other way around. I do not want to end on a scary note, so I'm going to ask you about some of the benefits that you see in the future. And I'm going to come to you, Neil, for that.
Yeah, so I've been doing a little bit of research into a field called computer vision, and this was all inspired by the recent developments with Claude, which is a generative AI platform, and its ability to use a keyboard and a mouse and use a computer effectively. So computer vision is about this ability for computers to understand the 3D environment that we live in. And I can see all sorts of benefits for people with disabilities that maybe they can't see, or I'm sort of picking up on what you were talking about, Kuba, in some ways. But I do think this technology could be really transformational in providing, in helping people enhance their own ability to navigate the world and be productive and live meaningful, valuable lives. So that's really inspiring. I do think it's going to take, all being well, it will take a lot of boring, repetitive tasks away. The ability to do, review lots of detailed data in a very quick amount of time and summarize things, that's going to be, that already is hugely convenient. And some of the developments we're seeing in medical fields, like the ability to spot patterns and improve cancer diagnosis, for example. We had an event recently where one of our partners came along and was talking about a camera that can take that you swallow it, and it can take pictures of the inside of your body and then help detect bowel cancer and that kind of thing. And so all of that stuff is hugely positive, and I do think it's going to have a big impact in the future. So I think all of those things are things to be excited about.
Thank you. Kuba, any positive scenarios that you would like to add to that?
Sure, I believe that right now we've got really powerful tools that will allow us to solve problems that was unsolvable in our past, because this is something like the internet. You know, we had a lot of problems, we couldn't solve it, but right now with, for example, even LLMs, we can solve a lot of problems. So we've got to unleash our creativity, and I believe that we won't create an utopia. So on the one hand, it will solve a lot of problems. On the one hand, it will create in other problems. But I believe when we will have really creative, responsible people that will have a strength to take those solutions and create something interesting, it will be beautiful world.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to end on that beautiful vision. Thank you so much. What I really loved about this conversation is that it all revolved around humans, and the true impact of AI is still unknown to us, but let's hope that we as humans stay at the center of it. This conversation was delivered to you by real humans, and I hope that you enjoyed it half as much as we did having this conversation. Huge thank you to you, Kuba and Neil, for joining me today, and huge thank you to everyone who are listening to us. And I hope that we can see you again for the future episodes of BrAInstorm. See you soon.